You know, actually now would be the most incredible time to be mowing the lawn, so hopefully the audio doesn't pick up too much over there. But hello everyone and welcome back to the Wolf Pack. First off, thank you to Leader Games for giving me yet another incredible opportunity to work on their amazing catalog of games. Today I am breaking down Oath, and I haven't done one of these full breakdown videos in a very long time. So, being updated for 2022, I wanted to give a quick organization of how today's video is gonna flow. I wanted to start off with like the biggest problem that I had going into this cinematic and making it, and then we will go step by step through the Adobe Premiere timeline, talking about particular edits as they go in chronological order. And then lastly, I'm gonna finish off with some questions that I had from all of you, both on Instagram and on Discord. I set up a poll or like a question Q&A thing, and so I'm gonna be answering all of those as well. However, if there's anything specific that you want me to cover in either, in actually the next episode, which I will be breaking down Fort, let me know down in the comments below if you like the format and all that good stuff. So with that said, the biggest problem that I had going into this particular cinematic for Oath is was actually finding the song. Oath was so hard because it has that fantasy theme. It has kind of a darker, moodier theme, but it's not like my typical song choice is usually very upbeat. It has some rock in it. It has country in it. So it has those elements of those genres, but that doesn't really fit for Oath. And it took me 3 days just scrolling through the music library, all the music libraries that I use in order to find this particular song, because I wanted that classical feel. I wanted I wanted a violin. I wanted some kind of string instrument to be played because I felt like that was the vibe, the aura that Oath was emanating. It had that classical feel to it. It has those fantasy themes to it. But I also, at the same time, needed to find something that was upbeat and catchy as well. So those are always my most difficult challenges in like picking songs for cinematics. In particular, Oath was very, very hard. I think it was, out of all the cinematics I've done, I think Oath is probably among the top 3 most difficult to film. On top of that, Oath is a very complex game too. So it was very hard to film and show different mechanics and how different things are being played as I'm going through the cinematic as well. So those are my 2 biggest challenges for Oath. 1, song choice, and 2, the gameplay itself was very hard to film. So now let's get straight into the timeline. Also, if you saw in this background, it was all like pitch black and dark. Well, if you haven't seen the last vlog, I'll link it right up here. That's the background I used. So I put it to use right away and I incorporated it into this Oath video. Okay, now the opening shot is something that I always stress over because this is going to be the hook for your audience, for your viewers to stay interested in the rest of your video. So I always spend ages figuring out what I want to do for this opening shot. For this one, I had 1 spotlight. You can actually see a sliver of light in the opening shot, and that is straight on to Oath. And then I had the black backdrop, and the entire game was set up as if it was a brand new game as well. On top of that, I also didn't use any fancy lights that I usually do in the background of my videos because A, I don't want it to be overused. B, I wanted to capitalize on the rule of thirds, which means you really focus in on one particular frame in like a third of the shot. And I've never filmed a game in like the corner of my video, so I wanted to incorporate that for Oath. And C, open up with text on exactly what you're gonna be doing thematically in the game, which is to guide the course of history. So we started off very, very simple. Now, a really important part in filming cinematics is to really listen to the beat and see how that's going to be visualized on screen. You'll notice here that the violin has like a pause. So on that very first pause, I wanted it to fade into black and then reveal the next frame. But then the next beats are big. And I also incorporated really big bass hits. You can see here on the bottom, big bass hits in order to match those giant cuts. Secondly, you'll also notice throughout the entire video that there are a ton of sound effects. So if we just play this without music, this is what the first 10 seconds is gonna look like. If there's one big takeaway from today's video, it is to capitalize on your sound design. Sound design is everything. If you really bring in a punch to your sound design, it's going to give so much more life to your videos. Arguably, this video can even be played without music, and I feel like it would still bring a very nice dramatic effect to the overall video. A lightning quick breakdown of sound design here. You'll notice how you hear like the wind, because that's going to create this atmospheric effect, which is amazing because Brooke from Leader Games, who I was working with, she actually used atmospheric as one of the videos, as one of the words to describe this video, and that was amazing because that was the exact intention of what I wanted the cinematic to feel like. I wanted to feel like it's this huge, vast world, pun intended for Leader Games, a huge, vast world for Oath. And in order to do that, wind is going to help create that effect. And then we have the unfolding of the map. That one, I just used like the sound of a flag or a cloth in order to give that waving effect. Right, so I kind of just manipulated the sound design for that. And then we go into the big punch, like to keep people hooked onto the video, Seize the Throne. Big bass hits, they kind of fade away. And as they fade away, it matches with the visual, which also fades to black as well. And then we get into the beautiful coin that Oath provides. And I provide a little whoosh and also some coins jingling in your pocket. So you don't necessarily have to match your sounds with actual sounds that item makes, and it will still be played off pretty well. That's what's amazing about sound design. You can be very flexible in how you're able to match it with the actual video. You just have to be careful because it can turn out to be very, very corny if you don't align it correctly. So that's a little bit on sound design. Now, I also wanted to point out in these first three hits, Seize the Throne, you'll notice how there's like a lot of dust in the background or almost snow. That's actually added in post. Now, if I were to take out the background that I actually masked in, it would look something like this. So you get this pitch black darkness. And for me in this moment, it felt a little blank. So I really wanted to add some texture to that. So what I did was I added in this overlay. And then you also see that I masked in each one individually. So with each frame, it will change just like that. And I did that for all three in order to provide that dust overlay effect, right? So you can see the individual mask put in for all those meeples. And then when we get to the coin, which has all of these patterns and ridges, I wanted to strip all that out and keep a ominous black tone. Okay, now this was by far the most difficult transition. Every time you see transitions like that, they take me at least 6 to 8 hours to get this correctly, both filming and editing. First off is the intention. I knew I wanted to have a transition where the map was going to unfold and my camera kind of just follows through the tunnel and then reveals the next shot. Secondly, in order to film this, I had to do this all like one-handed, right? So I have to hold the map with one hand, let it go, and then film. And as I'm filming, I have to be super, super stable and carry that all the way through and make sure that I time it with how the tunnel is going to be revealed, because I don't know where the tunnel is going to land. Sometimes it was actually towards the end, sometimes it was towards the beginning, and I just have to be super coordinated to find that spot and not jitter, because you'll see it in the camera. If you jitter and you stop and you hesitate, you will see that movement and it's going to just ruin it for me. So this one took, I think, like 15 to 20 takes for me to get right in camera. And then in post, what I did was I formed a mask. So mask, I would say, is like more advanced editing. You saw it initially with the overlay, with the snow overlay. But here, when the map would show the other side, which is like that pitch black darkness or even a little bit of the red light shown here in the spotlight, when that side was showing, that's when I started this mask. And then I went frame by frame and just opened it up more and more and more and more. And I did that for, I don't know how many frames this is, maybe 20 or so frames. And really softened it up, eased it out, and created a smooth transition as it went into the next clip, which was me holding the Black Faction meeple. And that one also had a spotlight with some smoke into it. And that's the overall transition went into that. You also see some flares too, because I used a specific lens flare that allows you to see these nice dreamy effects as you're holding the meeple in different angles of light as well. Okay, quick break here. I know this has been super technical, but let's break it down and make it simple. Basically, what I've been doing is incorporating a ton of sound design that matches movement and that also matches the visual effects of the video that I'm showing. So like if it fades to black, then you'll have that bass hit that also fades with that black as well. Next up, there are a ton of details that you have to incorporate while filming. Here, you'll see like the lens flare, you'll see the spotlight, you'll see smoke, and all of those things come together. And the last thing I wanted to mention about this particular frame, why I wanted to use that flare for this shot, is because you heard that kind of shiny sound. That one matches perfectly with the flares and the streaks that you see along both my hands and the meeple. Okay, I wanted to break down the shot because someone actually in the Discord, let me go ahead and read off that question, asked a wonderful question that I wanted to answer. Okay, this is from SCPT Matt. How much of your shots are storyboarded out with an intended flow and how the shots will all come together, and how many shots are just an idea you want to try and you decide how to incorporate it in post? Now for my cinematics, I have a terrible process, and that is I don't storyboard at all. The only time I do storyboard is when I'm doing the lifestyle shoots and I'm doing a commercial with a ton of people around. For the cinematics, they're on my own time and I'm filming this alone in my studio. So I have more flexibility in that, and it actually takes me more time to storyboard than to actually start filming. So I don't storyboard at all, except when it comes to lifestyle shoots. In Oath, I didn't storyboard at all, and how I figure out the flow of it is honestly, I just listen to the song over and over again, and everything is kind of visualized already. So I know how I'm gonna start the video, I know how I'm gonna end the video, and my driving force is that I always do something new with every cinematic. For Oath, the one thing I wanted to make sure I nailed in this is to actually use a gimbal. And the reason why is because I have avoided using gimbal in the past because A, it's such a hassle to use a gimbal, and B, I think I didn't really know how to use it correctly for me to warrant the use of it in my cinematics, but in Oath that completely changed because you have this huge map. And I wanted to capture the scale of it, not only using sound design for wind, but to also show and like really have the camera pan all over the map, as you saw in that previous shot. Let me play it one more time. Right, so you saw how the camera just zooms in over there and zooms out. That's done with the gimbal. And this is the first time ever that I've used the gimbal for cinematics, because I'm actually gonna be using gimbal for every single cinematic going forward, because I know how to use it now. And you're able to create these very, very cool camera like zoom over effects. It almost looks as if the camera is just like flying all over the map and just showing all these components at once. And I just love that look. That's what I wanted to, if anything, that's my one storyboard for Oath. And then you'll also notice that in this shot, there's a lot of other things going on too. If the camera like zooms fast, naturally there's going to be motion blur. I actually incorporated motion blur one by one. Now in that one pan shot, I added in motion blur as it was going fast from point A to point B. So see how the camera just starts off by looking at the box, and as it zooms into the yellow faction, there's that motion blur incorporated. There's some whoosh sounds to match the movement as well as the camera with the camera. And then we go into our transition. So as it goes from the map into the yellow faction, it zooms out and it swipes across the table. And that reveals the next frame. So that was also done intentionally because I like to give myself a lot of flexibility as I'm filming and know that these certain shots can be used to make a cool transition in the next frame, which is how I use this table here in order to mask it out into the next frame of another key ingredient in making this cinematics, which is adding movement. Now I know the cards aren't in focus here. That's fine. I actually wanted in particular the Chancellor board to be in focus because this is the main character, or at least this is the faction that one person is going to control and rule over the land. So that's why I wanted that really big, punchy purple lights to match the Chancellor board. And then I don't show my faces obviously in these cinematics, so I want to incorporate movement somehow. And one way I can do that is to add some interesting dynamic movements with my hands for showing cards as well. The next goal here is to always add variety, always add interest. You can't always get that interest peak if you just show the board game on the table. So here I'm showing some of the relics in my hand, and then I actually like hold it in my side right here. I have my camera focused in, autofocus is centered in on the cards. We have smoke in the background. We have purple lights from the Chancellor because these are still Chancellor related relics, like the Grand Scepter is what the Chancellor would actually start with in the game. And then I rotate my body around like this, blocking the camera in order for me to provide yet another transition point into this frame. Now, to further address Matt's question, asking about like, how do you know which shots make it in post? These are some of my stable shots, which is just holding the component completely isolated in a dark background, because I know that the top portion of this frame is going to be used with text in post. Especially for more complicated games, you would need to have some text pairing with it so people know exactly what you're looking at and how game mechanics are distilled in video. If anything, this was also storyboarded as well, since this is a staple shot that I always use. Okay, now in this particular part of the cinematic, I'm introducing a lot of text now because I'm explaining parts of the game as we move forward. And you'll also notice that I always match colors with the pieces. Purple lights with the purple chancellor, blue lights with the blue faction, yellow with yellow. Now, this is probably the most straightforward part of the video where I was very literal in how you translated the player actions. So search, you would actually draw a couple cards and you would pick one. And you'll also notice here how I take the hand of cards and then block the camera, again, providing more flexibility to create this transition in post. Okay, now with all of those actions, again, you'll notice that as I am zooming in and out, as I'm moving from frame to frame, I'm always incorporating that motion blur. So all of that is done with individual frames, making sure that you provide that realistic camera effect. Okay, now this has to be some of the most satisfying parts for me as I'm editing these videos, is that when you get a particular beat in the song, and you can really visualize what's going on. Here, you have all these fast string sounds, and then all of a sudden it just stops and it just gets quiet, and the bass kind of just drifts off. That is a perfect visualization of having the camera kind of just pan over the game and then zoom back out and just stop and slowly just zoom out, showing the world of Oath. So that's one particular frame that I really, really loved editing and filming. Now we slow down a little bit and we incorporate more slow motion movements. A lot of the shots before are actually done in 24 FPS, which is just like how you'd watch a TV frame. And then we get into showcasing the components, because overall, the idea behind a cinematic showcase that I had originally, that is still true to this day, is that I am just showing the components of the game. You lose that showing effect if you don't have a story. So nowadays in 2022, I always try to incorporate a story, how the game is played, what the theme is, and then substantiate that by showing an overview of all the components. That's how we get into all of the cards, all of the maps that you show, some of the relics. You also notice here how I have all these beautiful light streaks and flares that are just shining onto the cards. And then we get into the gorgeous accessories that Oath has. Heard that page sound effect? And then, like I said, once you hear that bass, the tone shift of the music changes how the video is filmed as well. Because then we get into all these slow motion shots and everything just, the pace overall is just slower. So by this point, you kind of assume that the audience is here to stay to the end. That's why I keep these slower shots for the end. That way, A, gives breathing room for the audience, because you don't want to make everything fast, because then they're gonna not breathe either. You want to give them some time to breathe and relax, and then you also want to give them time to soak in all these visual cues, these details that I include in all these shots, and really just showcase all of the components in the game. Okay, and then we'll skip to the final frame since Premiere is not cooperating. But final frame, we have the lasting shot. This is going to be the last thing that your viewers see, so I always put like everything on the table, and then put the dramatic lights. We have flares still, and we have that little snippet of empty space for, this is room for logos or for any kind of finishing text, a call to action, available now, or pledge on Kickstarter on April 15th, whatever. So dates, call to actions, or the logo, and we leave space for that right up top. And then this frame just slowly fades to black. So that is the cinematic showcase. And now we'll go ahead and show you real quickly the commercial cut, and I'll briefly talk about this one as well. Okay, so the commercial cut has completely different intentions here. Now we start off fast and we keep that pace throughout the entirety of the video. There is no slowing down for commercial cuts because, again, our goal here is to hook the audience the entire time from beginning to end. So the pacing is rapid. And what I do is I take the best cuts in the cinematics and I put it together in a way that the story would make sense from the get-go. Like the first 3 seconds, I want story there. And I also want the best transitions included as well. There's no downtime for commercial cuts. So that's pretty much the overall theme for between commercials and cinematics. And there's also way more text involved as well. You'll see actually text included throughout the entirety of the commercial cut because we're showing people what this game is about, what you're doing on your turn, and why this game is captivating and why it should be interesting to you, or why should they, investigate more on their own and see more about what this game is about. Last thing I want to mention about this too is that I put Seize the Throne in the beginning of the last video, but here I had to build up all the way to the end. So I start with showing people, okay, what is this game about? And we also finish off by having a tie to exactly what you're doing, which is seizing the throne. That's not the only thing you're doing in Oath, but that's like one main mechanic. I feel like that's the most captivating mechanic that Oath has. And that's why I included it at the end. And of course, we finished off with our showcase shot as well. And let's go ahead and wrap up this video with some questions from all of you. Tom from A Board Gamer 1 has a ton of questions for me. Thank you, Tom. What are the general specs to look for in a lighting, or how to make your light work for or with you? That's a really good question. So in this video, we start off with one spotlight, and I'll link the spotlight down below. Honestly, I don't think you really need a spotlight like this if you're starting to make cinematics. If you are, doing it professionally, of course. But I'll leave the spotlight link down below. Any kind of spotlight pretty much works. But the reason why I like this one in particular is because you can actually mold the frame of the spotlight. You can control how big it is, and it's like very, very specific, like scientifically specific on how you can create this oval effect. And you can also add in different filters that changes the shape of the light, because you'll actually notice here on the speckle of the Chancellor that there are spots on the meeple, and I like that in particular because it doesn't give a very harsh light. The light is kind of more diffused. But overall, top-down lighting, that just means you have one main light over your showcase. That way the background is just black and it just looks way more cinematic. That's my favorite go-to when it comes to board game videos, top-down lighting. Secondly, accent lights. I didn't open with any accent lights here, but you'll notice that as I go into each faction, blue, yellow, purple, then those lights match the colors of the faction. And at the very end, I also use red and green because that's actually the color of the map. So the map on the left side is more green. I included a green accent light there. And the map on the right side is more red, aka why I showed the red accent light on the right side as well. So top-down lighting, accent lighting to answer your question. Next one, to get a component to shine or stand out more than the background, is it more film-based or editing-based? It's both. So you always want to film, assuming that you can't do anything with it in post. When you film a shot, make sure you are 100% happy with it because you don't want to depend on editing afterwards. Editing can only enhance what's already there. So that's why I use top-down lighting, because then it can isolate one component in particular, especially when I'm holding different meeples with my hand. And secondly, in post, I'll actually add on a lumetri mask. It's basically allowing me to form a specific shape around that meeple or component, and I can brighten it a little more in post. Next question, what props or staging tools do you find yourself reaching for the most when filming or shooting? I've gotten this question a lot. Originally I had this question from Daniel at Board Game Feast, and I will make a video dedicated to this. I'm so overdue about this. But the one tool I go with the most, it has to be, okay, I'll spit off like 3 back-to-back. A, this sit-stand table that I use it for everything, if that counts as a tool. B, I always use some form of light, either fairy lights, the GBM lights that they sent to me, or like a wand light like this one. This is the Yongno light stick. I didn't use it for this particular cinematic, but those are always my go-to things that I use to film. Always some form of accent light. Next, from Sword and Board Games. Hey Mike, quick and dirty color grading tip. Yeah, color grading has a whole science to it. I can show you real quick what I do for color grading. It's going to be different depending on the camera they use and everything. But one major thing that you want to use is make sure you film in log. Log is like the raw format for photos. And in particular for mine, when I shoot in log, you get a very like washed out color. So this is what it looked like. Let's go to a really bright color. How about this one, and we're going to turn off the color grade. It's going to be this one. Like, look how bad this footage looks before you color grade, right? But then when I add in the color grade, you get this beautiful, vibrant, delicious color. And honestly, color grading is my favorite part of editing. When you color grade like this, what you want to do is you want to increase the contrast of your line curve. So you go to curves in your editing panel. Any editing software pretty much has this curve panel. And the first thing I do is adjust my shadows, which is going to be along the bottom left corner of your line curve. And I really bring that down in order to create that contrast. So you notice here how when I drop it down, it makes the background even more dark, even darker than it already is. So that's one way to create your punch. And then your midline is going to be around here. So this is going to be the mid colors. So in this case, it'll be the box and a little bit of the accent lights. So I drop that down a little bit as well. And then you want to bring up your highlights just a little bit. If you bring it up too much, you'll notice here how it just completely cranks up the light and it just looks way oversaturated. So just a very, very slight adjustment to your highlights is all that you need. And this will in particular affect the table since it's white and the accent lights since those are the brightest ones. So drop your shadows and increase your highlights. That's probably the biggest color grading tip I can give. And then the rest from there, if you're filming in log, you want to increase saturation. Now don't take me word for word on this because I am no master colorist, but I like to increase saturation and vibrance. And there's a ton of other things that you can do as well. Honestly, I can make like a 5-part series of what I do in order to color grade, but that is the quick and dirty tip for you, Mike. Drop your shadows, raise your highlights, and then if you're filming in log, which you should be, then increase your saturation and vibrance as well. Next up from Lanners Plays Games, no question, just excited to see it. Well, thank you, friend. I appreciate that. You know, comments like that always carry very, very far in my motivation. So thank you so much for that. And lastly, Rich Plays Board Games. I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max and I'm in need of some tips of how to bring my photos to life. Okay, well, the biggest tip that I have for that is using Lightroom. I use Adobe Lightroom on my phone, which is the iPhone 12, 11. Use Lightroom, learn how to edit from there when you're focusing in on them for board games as well. All right, well, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for joining me on this cinematic breakdown, and I will see you all in Fort.